Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you've chosen to join us today. I see we have a nice number of folks joining us today, and probably going to get few more joining as we begin. So thank you very much for joining us for our joint webinar today on understanding how to manage secure internal sharing and Microsoft external sharing in Microsoft 365. If we just jump to the next slide, I can introduce myself briefly. I'm Julian Mills. I'm a Vice President at Extranet User Manager, and we're really pleased to be joining Clarinet as a guest on one of their webinars. They're a great partner of ours. And I'm just going to set the table for Daniel and Peter as they get started. So just a couple quick reminders on webinars. So one is chat is going to be open throughout the session. Please feel free to ask questions. The more the merrier. The guys are really looking forward to engaging with everybody here. But please do stay on mute. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can ask a question in chat, and we'll make sure that we're monitoring those and ask for that. And most importantly, once again, welcome. Enjoy the session, and I know you're going to be looking forward to learning some outstanding ideas from Peter and Daniel, and I'll hand over to Peter. Or Daniel, rather.
Hi, I'm Daniel Morrow. I'm a managing partner and lead consultant at Clarinet Solutions. Really just a lot of experience in SharePoint intranets. You can find me if you want to talk to me after this or get in contact at all. My email is right there, dmorrow@clarinetsolutions.com, or visit our website. Yeah, but I've been in the industry doing intranets for over 25 years at this point. So I don't even want to put a number on it. It feels a little embarrassing. I don't want to date myself, but Clarinet Solutions, we're in San Diego. So pretty nice sunny area. Founded in 2010. Been working on intranets for the entire time in existence, but as Microsoft has progressed and things have changed in Microsoft 365, of course, we've gone on with Microsoft and do things like with Teams and everything else. And of course, things like extranets, right? How do we share documents? And that's why we're all here today. We are an Omnia partner, staff-based partner, extranet user manager partner, right? Which is where we come in here. Yeah, just recently pretty proud that we're on the Inc. 5000, one of the fastest growing companies in America. So yeah. And then
Thanks,
I
Daniel.
actually brought on Peter here. So we're really, really excited to have Peter here. He's going to tell him a bit about himself, but super excited, really, really stoked to have him on Microsoft MVP. Go, Peter. I'm pretty excited. So
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, Peter Carson here, president and founder of both Envision IT and Extranet User Manager, kind of two brands in one company, 13-time Office Apps and Services. So yeah, just like Daniel, been working in the SharePoint space and then the Office and Microsoft 365 space for a lot of years now. Run a local Toronto SharePoint users group if you're in the Toronto area. All my contact details are here. We are going to be publishing the deck up on our event page as well as the recording. So all these details will be available to you from there. So Daniel mentioned Clarinet is a partner of Extranet User Manager, and very proud of that relationship. Extranet User Manager has been around for quite some time as well, although it's really changed quite significantly in the last 2 years. We kind of blew the product up and doubled down just on Microsoft 365, completely rebuilt and re-architected. And our goal with the product is we like to say we make Microsoft simple, and we know that that's a very onerous statement because Microsoft is not simple, and it's not that we make all of Microsoft simple. It's really this external scenario of how do you share and collaborate with people external to your organization, whether that's document sharing, chat communications, publishing. There's lots of different models from that point of view. And the nice thing is that Microsoft 365, for the most part, from a licensing perspective, we'll touch on it at the end, makes that very easy. There's no additional cost to bring those guests in from that point of view. But our goal by making it simple is to still involve IT at the beginning of the process, but then make it easy and accessible for the business. Because if things are too hard for the business, they're going to say, hey, forget you, IT, I'm just going to go do my own thing. And that's where shadow IT comes in. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Say, hey, you bought Microsoft 365. It's an awesome suite. It's got awesome, best-in-class security. How do we make that easy for the business to use, both themselves and those external parties that they want to work with? So from an agenda point of view, what we're going to cover off today, we're going to start with what we call unstructured sharing with Microsoft 365. And full disclosure, you don't need to buy our product to do external sharing with Microsoft 365. We've actually built some really cool tools that work really well in particular use case scenarios. But as that gets bigger and more complex within an organization, there's more structure to it, that becomes difficult to do out of the box. And that's really where our product comes in. So we'll talk about those, out of the box scenarios from a Microsoft 365 point of view. We'll get into team share channels, which are fairly new. They've only been around for about a year or so. We'll actually talk about how, Clarinet and us use share channels to communicate partner to partner. We'll get into Azure Active Directory and B2B, which is this guest model where you can bring people in from outside your organization, multi-factor authentication, security, labeling from a security and sensitivity point of view, and licensing and such. But interspersed through here, we're going to do a number of demos as well, and actually take you through some live scenarios of that. So, I kind of touched briefly on unstructured, but what really is unstructured sharing in Microsoft 365? And most folks have probably seen these dialogues here, unless your organization locks external sharing down completely, which unfortunately a lot of organizations do. And why that's unfortunate is, you're not blocking people from sharing. You're just blocking them from sharing through Microsoft 365. They're still going to send email attachments, which are maybe inappropriate because they've got, personal health information, personally identifiable information, stuff like that. You should be better protecting that don't belong as email attachments. Maybe they're just getting their credit card out and setting up their own Dropbox account or Box account. Again, that whole shadow IT side of things. So, again, even if you're not using our product, and you're not able to do this part here, talk to your IT team and say, hey, is there some boundaries that we could play in? Because there is a lot of controls around, you don't have to open it for everybody or close it for everybody. You can say, hey, you need to belong to this group to be able to externally share. You can only share with these organizations. There's a lot of security controls that you can put around that. Unfortunately, with that comes complexity, and that's sort of the norm with Microsoft in general, is that, they build products for their 300 million monthly active users. That's a lot of people and a lot of organizations. They're all a little bit different, so they've got a lot of complexity in their products to fit all those scenarios, which often makes it challenging for the average business user to work with. You can do that sharing through SharePoint, through OneDrive, through Teams, through Windows Explorer. One of the things I like over the last year or two is they've standardized these dialogues across the board. So it doesn't matter if I'm in SharePoint, if I'm in Teams, I'm in just Windows Explorer and I want to share files, I can go through that same experience. And Daniel, we didn't actually use this in our collaboration. We're going to talk about how we go to structured sharing from a partner to partner point of view. If this was a normal, hey, you and I and Irina and Julian need to work together on the PowerPoint, it would have been pretty easy to just share that link and send that across, and you would have been able to access it in our Microsoft 365. And where this excels is away from email attachments, where if Irina sent this deck out to the four of us, suddenly we've got 4 copies of the PowerPoint in each of our inboxes and we're each working independently. I mean, Daniel, you were literally in this deck, earlier today, and so was Irina, and so was I, and we're all co-authoring because we've got a single version of the truth in one place in Microsoft 365. It's so much better place to work from that point of view. I don't know if you've got sort of personal experiences where you use the unstructured sharing that you want to share with the group as a whole here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the unstructured sharing bit. It's funny that you talk about that, because as you're talking through this, you're so right in that it's unstructured, but that doesn't mean it's like unsecure. That's not the case at all. Like it's unstructured, gives us impression that it's just like willy-nilly Wild West, and that's not the case, which is what I'm thinking, like, wow, you really got way more controls than some shadow IT or just email attachments or whatnot. And yeah, you're right. We could have actually done this exact, like, imagine everybody on this call, right? We actually worked together. It was really fun actually to build this PowerPoint presentation for you, and we did it in a structured way. And Peter's going to get into that because it was the conversation. Anyway, back to your question. Sorry, Peter, not to get too way off track, because I get excited about this stuff, so I start nerding out. So you got to like kick me in the shin or something, But things like this, like I just did it this morning where I was sharing a video. Someone wanted me to do like a quick interview for their board of directors, and so I did that last night and I shared it through my OneDrive, unstructured. Here's the video, done. Right? There's no collaboration necessary on that, and it's shared. They have access. I'm good to go. Right? It's a great example for that.
You twigged me on the example we've got in the screenshot here, which is anyone with this link can edit. And this freaks a lot of people out because they say, yeah, oh my gosh, like, oh, I've got this link out there that absolutely everybody in the world, if they had that link, could access it and work with that document. Guess what happens when you put an attachment into an email and send it out? Like, you've lost all control of it. People can forward it onto whoever they want. It's completely out there. Whereas this, yes, it sounds a little frightening, but it's actually more secure than an email attachment, because you could change your mind and say, oh, wait a minute, I think somebody inappropriately shared that. I'm just going to cancel that link.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pull back an attachment from an email. Once it's out there, it's gone. Whereas this, you've got that control over. So even these ones, I mean, this is a common one in particular, that if orgs maybe allow sharing, but they don't allow this one, often it's a misunderstanding of where that's appropriate, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So we could go for a long time here, but let's keep rolling through. So, if we think about sort of our checklist, and this is actually a set of questions that we use with Extranet User Manager when we're talking to prospective clients to say, hey, what sort of sharing do you want to do? And it helps to qualify whether they're sort of on that unstructured or more on the structured side of things. Who are you going to be sharing with? You can share with anybody from an external sharing point of view. And, often people get confused and think, hey, I need a Microsoft account to of that person that I want to share with. No, they can use any account. They can use a Gmail account. You can actually set up authentication so that they can sign in with their Gmail account as well as their personal Microsoft account. You may not want to do that, but it's all there and possible. The one I love that they added a couple of years ago was, if you don't have a Microsoft account or a Gmail account, just use a one-time passcode. Basically they say, hey, when you're signing in, we're going to send you a code. 10 seconds later, that code shows up in your inbox. You paste it in. That's effectively your password. And it's one time. So you use it. Nobody else can use it. It's tied to your login. So it's still secure from that point of view. And in fact, this mitigates a huge issue with extranets in general, which is in the traditional, hey, we're going to spin up a portal for our customers to come into or our partners to come in, and we're going to manage passwords for all those people. That's a nightmare. You don't want to do that. You have to deal with forgotten passwords. And what if that person doesn't even work for that organization anymore? They can still type in their old email address and the password that they've written down on a sticky note and still get into your portal. But if you connected it to their inbox, so they either have to have their Microsoft account or that one-time passcode, as soon as they lose access to that email address, which is going to happen the moment that, HR decides they're no longer working there, they're locked out of your portal too. So again, it's just way more secure from that point of view. And, what are your external users coming into? Could be lots of the different Microsoft 365 tools. I mean, as you go beyond there, it doesn't have to be just Microsoft 365, but the native sharing is very focused on that. And we'll talk about how we expose, Dynamics 365 from a CRM point of view to our partners like Clarinet as well as part of that. But the main things that we see, you mentioned, Daniel, using OneDrive for Business. That's a classic example of, hey, I need to do something up quick for a few people and share it out to them. Maybe that video is massive and there's no way that you're going to be sending that through email, even if you wanted to. It's just a better way of doing that. There's actually this cool feature in OneDrive for Business called request files. I don't know, Daniel, have you used it? I occasionally do. It's basically, hey, I want people to give me a bunch of files. So let's say I'm a conference organizer and I want all the speakers to drop their presentations in so I can publish them up on the website. I don't want them emailing them to me. I don't want to deal with a whole bunch of complexity with security. You can create a request files link in OneDrive and give that link to whoever you want, and they can drop files into your OneDrive through that link. They can't see anything in OneDrive. They can't even see the other presenters' presentations that they drop in. It's basically a black box that you drop stuff into, and only the person that owns the OneDrive gets to see what's there. So it's a great data collection scenario. But the sharing through SharePoint, we do that a lot as well. Like this particular deck is actually in a shared channel in Teams that we'll talk more about in a second, but it also exists in the SharePoint site that's underneath that shared channel. I mean, Team shared channels, I mentioned, are fairly new. Daniel, I'm trying to remember, when did we get Clarinet? You were one of our first partners to get set up on a shared channel when they hit public preview about a year or so ago, I think.
Yeah, it was early. We were pretty early on that. So probably one of the first of our interactions as well, to be honest with you, with it. So it's good to, kind of eat your own dog food, make sure the dog food's filet mignon, right?
Yeah, we love that.
There you go.
Yeah, and I mean, we have an article now on our website about how we use share channels. And we share that with clients and with partners to say, hey, there's stuff that you need to do on your side. There's stuff that we need to do on our side. This is how it all fits together. Because if we think about teams, I mean, we've got standard channels, which are your regular channels in a team. And then they brought out this concept of private channels that you can pick a subset of the people. But I really don't see a scenario where private channels actually make any sense anymore. I think share channels basically takes all that over. I don't know if you feel the same, Daniel.
I can kind of see the use case for it still, actually, like if there's a certain subset, but it is kind of interesting because when they announced private channels, what clients were actually thinking they were saying before experiencing it, they were thinking shared channels is what they were
Yeah.
thinking, right? So yeah, but you got a point, and it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. But that could be something. I haven't thought about it that way. I always thought, well, I could see there's a use case for standard, obviously, private and shared. I get the kind of use cases between the three of them, but yeah, there could be. I guess it
But
depends on what your external sharing philosophy is, or what you're doing internally there. So yeah, maybe.
well,
Yeah.
the thing to remember is both shared and private channels are not necessarily for external use cases. They can be
Mhm.
completely internal, and
Right.
this Venn diagram
Totally.
helps
Yep.
explain that a private channel. Actually, that's not quite right because that circle should be completely inside the
Inside.
team.
Exactly.
the,
Exactly.
the key with a private channel is it can only be a smaller set than the team it belongs to. You can never add somebody additional that doesn't belong to the main team, whereas a shared channel doesn't care. It could be people in the team, outside the team, inside the organization, outside the organization. So I mean, any use case you can satisfy with a private channel, which would be a subset of the team, you can equally satisfy it with a shared channel.
Equally
That's
or
why I say
better,
I don't
really.
really see a need for a shared channel going
Yeah.
forward. The cool thing is,
Equally or better, actually, right? So one of the use cases I think about with a shared channel for internal is like you got an HR team, let's say, and you have managers that need to have access to certain resources, but they don't need access to the rest of the HR team. That's internal shared channel, really. That's it. So
even the other way, where a share channel may be broader. So let's say
mhm,
that HR team is the private team where they discuss
mhm.
salary reviews and all
Yeah.
sorts of confidential stuff that the organization as a whole shouldn't see. They could create a shared channel in their HR team, which is company-wide HR questions, and everybody in the organization belongs to that shared channel. They
Yeah.
can't see that private team from there.
Yeah.
So as
It's
you're
beautiful.
planning out,
Beautiful.
information architecture and intranets and teams and things like that, it opens up a lot of scenarios from that point of view. But the other big thing about shared channels is that they're very different than guests coming into Microsoft 365 in general. If you bring external users into a shared channel, it's very much organization to organization. So you're first setting up an organization to be allowed to be part of your shared channel, and then you're picking users and groups from that organization to be in your shared channel.
Mhm.
And where that becomes really valuable is that as those people are invited into the shared channel, it just appears as part of their teams. Like
Yeah.
our Clarinet EUM shared channel that you're part of, Daniel. I mean, it just shows in your teams list, right? You don't have to
Mhm.
tenant switch or do anything fancy to see those
Yeah,
threads.
it's a beautiful thing, honestly. It's really nicely done.
I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but I've got 40, 50 Teams tenants that I'm a guest in that I never see what's happening
Never,
because I never bother to
never.
look at them.
No. It's so tedious to try to change the tenant and the different. It's never worked. It didn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Whereas the share channel, it's in your activity feed, it's in your regular teams, it's there with everything else that you work on. So
Hmm.
it's a much better experience from that point of view. Now, I mean, you can actually do this outside of Microsoft 365 as well. You can actually go right into the Azure portal and invite guest users in through here. And you can actually delegate a role to a business person to say, hey, I'm not going to give you sort of admin control of Azure Active Directory of the tenant, but you'll be able to invite people in through this, either one at a time or bulk through an invitation process. I've never inflicted this on a client because the Azure portal is a scary place for a business user to go. It's not friendly whatsoever. I don't know, Daniel, have you ever brought somebody in there?
Not from a business user, but IT, and depending on how they want to kind of control how they're sharing externally, there's different things. And if they have a protocol such that it requires IT to do everything and do the all, then yes. But for business users, definitely 100% no, no way.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We really don't want IT to be gatekeepers in these scenarios. Like they don't know who the business wants to share with. So why should the business open service tickets, talk to IT to invite that person in? Like it's not an efficient process. And IT's got typically way more things on their priority list than they need to have time to deal with. So if we can take this one off, it's just better from that point of view. Okay, so let's talk about deeper in from a structured sharing point of view, how we work together, not just for this webinar, but in general as partners. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in my Teams views here. And this is always a mystery when I'm doing live webinars as to what's going to be in my Teams feed and things like that. I won't go to my activity feed. But what we've decided, and actually give talks on what I call Teams First Information Architecture. So when you're building an IEA for an organization, in the past, that was all about SharePoint and how you structure things. It really now needs to be Teams first, and what are you doing with Teams? And we actually went through a bunch of hoops even recently and restructured what this looked like, because we used to create a team for each partner. So there used to be a Clarinet team that, Daniel, you weren't a member of. That was kind of our private area to trash talk you, no offense, and have conversations that didn't involve the partner. And then we had this shared channel, which was the place that was open from that point of view. And we said, you know what, we don't really need that other spot. And it got confusing because each of those had their own SharePoint sites underneath them. It was just too much. So we actually collapsed all that down. We said, hey, we just got one team called EUM Partners, and each of our partners at Clarinet Solutions will create a shared channel. And you can see that little link in there shows that that's a shared channel that has external members in it. And for the folks on the call, you can see, Daniel showing busy because he's in the call here, but he's just a member of that team. So I can, start typing in here and mention Daniel. He's not part of our organization, but it finds him and adds him in through there. Now that's because we've added him to the shared channel. I can't mention anybody at Clarinet unless I've actually put them in. So if I come in here to Clarinet Solutions and say I want to manage this channel, Irene and I are the owners of this team. We can see Matt from Clarinet as well as Daniel are in there. Rashawn's in there. We can add additional people in as part of that. And what we've actually done is we've added our operations team, which is a team that we know that everybody that works at Envision IT belongs to, as a member for the shared channel as well. And that way we don't have to add individual people in as part of that. So it becomes super easy to manage from that perspective. Now, some people are, frightened about the security from a shared channels point of view, and there's some valid arguments about that. Like when Clarinet allowed us to allow inbound access into our shared channels, I don't think, was it you, Daniel, or Matt that set that up?
I'm pretty sure it was Matt. Yeah,
it was probably Matt. Yeah, so I think he wide open added that in, which means effectively, when we're inviting a member, so if I come here and say, hey, I want to share this channel with people, and I start typing the email address of somebody at Clarinet, it's actually live connecting to the Clarinet tenant and letting me browse that and add people into the shared channel. And in bigger orgs, maybe they've got SOC 2 or ISO 27001 security protocols in place that say, hey, that's not cool. You can't allow your partner to see your entire address list and browse through that. You can actually lock that down. You can say, hey, let's create a group on our side and say only people that belong to this group can be seen by the partner to be invited into their shared channel. So there's a lot of controls you can put around that from that point of view. But if we come back to the channel itself, we can see all the threads back and forth and, changes to slides literally, an hour before, we're last minute, hey, tweak. Teams actually makes it really easy to do those sorts of things. But I can come over to the Files tab here as well and say, hey, I want to look at the files themselves. And there's actually the PowerPoint, last modified by Daniel. You were the last person in working on that. And, 23 minutes ago, that was literally at the top of the hour. I don't know what you were editing as we were starting the presentation. But, it's pretty cool from that point of view that we've got that co-authoring experience through that. Now, this is all from a Microsoft 365 perspective. Daniel, you and Matt are super comfortable in that. That's your business. Not every partner or every client or every vendor necessarily has that comfort. So one of the things that we've done with Extranet User Manager is actually created a portal that our partners can come to. So this is actually the Clarinet page in our portal. So portal.extranetusermanager.com is a private, secure site. And it sits on top of Microsoft 365 and basically hides that complexity. So if you think back to my statement of, we make Microsoft simple, this is a big part of how we make Microsoft simple. So if Matt and Daniel weren't super comfortable in 365, they could come here and say, hey, there's my PowerPoint deck. I know there's a whole bunch of other stuff in Teams and in SharePoint. I don't care about that. I just want to click that link and start co-authoring that document. It's super easy for them to do that. We can see all the people that are part of the group here. Now, full disclosure, we actually haven't built all the product support to link our groups in EUM and the people that are in them to the shared channels and teams, but it's part of the backlog of what we're planning to do. Right now, we just keep those in sync back and forth through them. But this becomes a very simple way to get in there. And we've got links here to say, hey, I want to go over to the SharePoint Online site, which is actually the site collection that's behind that shared channel. Every time you create a shared channel in Teams, it creates a SharePoint site here, and we can see all the documents. And we even put some web parts in here that show the same links. So they're in the partner portal, and we've got that same featured document. Once you feature it in one place, it shows up in both places from there. But this can be a little overwhelming if I'm not familiar with SharePoint to say, hey, I've got left nav, top nav, right nav. Oh my goodness, there's so many things I can do here. I just want to get into the deck and start editing it. That's where the partner portal comes into that. But it goes beyond that. I mean, we've got access to sales and marketing resources, over to Zendesk, which is our partner portal from a support point of view. So we use single sign-on. Daniel, once you've signed in here, you can just hop into to Zendesk from there. I won't show it. We actually have a partner dashboard that uses Power BI that has a nice report that shows Clarinet's pipeline to say, how many opportunities are we jointly working together? What stage are they at? Are they waiting on Clarinet, on us, on the client? What's the next step here? So again, it becomes a key way to work together. And that's all happening in Dynamics CRM, not in Microsoft 365. But again, once you've got that identity in Azure AD, you can use that in lots of different systems and not just Microsoft's. Like Zendesk is not a Microsoft tool, but it supports that as well from that perspective. So one sign-in, no password, and bring everything together in one place. That's really our key here. I know, Daniel, you haven't really had a chance to play with this too much because we've literally been putting it together for the webinar here. You're sort of our partner number one guinea pig to try this stuff out. But
yeah, happy to do it too. Yeah, it's really, really cool. I like the tagline and kind of the vision, mission of simplifying Microsoft, particularly when it comes to portals and external sharing and extranets. It does get complicated, which is why we have a lot of people on the webinar because they're all asking the same questions, right? So it's perfect.
Cool. So let's flip back to the deck side. Just a few stats that Irene had pulled together from Finances Online as a reference there. Just the number of professionals who risk losing files by using email. I mean, sometimes they have no choice. It was interesting. I'm going to talk more about this, but going through a financial application process and how much of that was email based because the financial institutions just don't do sharing well from that point of view. And there's a huge risk from that point of view. Just people that can't find stuff, so they recreate it. There's a massive risk there, and just the productivity loss around that. So I won't go into all the stats here, but some interesting stats around collaboration and productivity and some of the challenges from that point of view. But Daniel, let me flip it over to you because you, as Clarinet, you've got a number of law profession clients that you work with. So talk a bit about, specific to that industry vertical, what do you see from an external sharing challenges point of view?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about all this. What we wanted to do, right, in this in these slides here was really convey that there are a lot of commonalities when we're talking about external sharing across all industries, but there are definitely differences. And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about was like, okay, what makes these things a little bit different, right? Because it's not the same across everybody. It's not the same requirements or questions or concerns. So from a legal or professional services standpoint, what we're seeing a lot of is we need things to be secure. We want to have audit trails. We want to have, the ability to have control over documents and how long they're retained or what we're trying to ask people for. And so what we see a lot of this is more around the external sharing we're talking about is we have a client, we need to get documents from them. Right, and we want to do it securely, and we want to have these documents, boom, 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 that we're checking off that we're getting from them, and we need all that to be secure, and everything to be tightened up, nice and beautiful, because we're talking about sensitive information, personally identifiable information, possibly from professional services. It could be financial information, it could be different things that are happening for those. So that's one thing that we see a lot of. It's a challenge, and sometimes I think it's so daunting. To your point earlier, Peter, is that they just don't do it. But they are doing it. It's
Yeah.
just they're doing it
You're
somewhere.
never not doing it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, it's a Dropbox account or Box or something or I don't know, G Suite or something, and it's just like they're emailing it. So there's a better way, more controlled way, a safer way, right? With the technology that they have. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, we have another number of law firms who use our product as well, and no offense to them, but law firms in general are not first movers from a technology point of view.
Oh no.
They are not early adopters, and nobody wants to be the first. They kind of look at their peers and say, okay, have they done it yet? Okay, now we can do it. And we find that there's way old FileNet, OpenText, all these document and records management systems that are not cloud based. They're still in data centers on premises and things like that, and they're only just getting going on the cloud journey. But hoping to help them move that along and say, hey, you may think that your on-premise data center is more secure than the cloud. You're typically quite wrong from that point of view. But flipping it up and going to another sector. So I kind of alluded to this one on the financial sector side. So, Extranet User Manager is a kind of maybe overshare here. We're a bootstrapped business, and we've been using the cash flow and revenue on the consulting side of the business to fund the product development for years. And it's gotten to the point that, we've got some pretty aggressive growth plans. We need bigger working capital. And I went out probably about 7 months ago, to a number of financial institutions. Say, hey, we want to do a debt working capital raise, and of course, they got a long list of things that they need from us, and a bunch of that, we had to close our year end and do a full review engagement that we hadn't done before. So that took us a couple of months, but we were ready, and we had prepped them by the end of May, and we now have signed term sheets, but we don't have financing in place, and we're 6 months later. Like, this has been a very slow process, and maybe a lot of the audience is probably US. Canada's a lot slower from a technology and risk point of view through that, but it was an interesting experience. So working with 4 different financial institutions and how they were each different from a data collection and sharing point of view. One was our existing commercial bank, and they straight off right at the beginning said, hey, we've got this whole separate secure email portal that you have to use. That's how we do document sharing. It's like, hey, that sounds and it actually looks pretty old school, but okay, we'll use that. And that was the process we used there. The second one, I actually set up a data room that I'm going to show you in a minute, an example of, and invited them into that. They were immediately blocked by their bank. Like, they couldn't come to our secure portal, and we were back to email share. About halfway through the application process, found out that they actually do have their own portal, and we were able to use that to continue the process. But we'd actually done a lot of due diligence just through emails before that, because I wasn't even aware that they had that option on their side. The third one, I also set up a data room and invited them in. Not only did they block from the data room, but they also blocked all the emails that referenced it and anything about security. So, the account manager on that side wasn't even responding to us. That delayed the whole process literally by a month or two of all this confusion of, hey, why are we in this black hole? And we finally figured it out. And then the fourth one, actually said to us, hey, we have a portal, but it's horrible. It's managed by IT. I don't want you to use it. Can you go get a Box account and put your financial documents in there? I said, hey, how about we set it up in our data room? And they were actually able to come in and use it. So in the end, I think they're going to become a target for us to say, hey, you should use our product and do a better job from a financial point of view. But yeah, I mean, this is an area that has a lot of structure to the exchange of very secure documents, but often done very poorly. And Canada, from a financial sector point of view, is a very, small number of organizations. There's 5 banks that control almost all of the financial industry in Canada, with a smaller set of credit unions underneath that. I mean, in the US, you have 12,000 tier 2 banks or something. It's a massive market from that point of view. But just, sharing some challenges personally from that perspective. But Daniel, let me flip it back over to you, and let's talk about experiences you've had, because you've done a lot of work in healthcare, pharma, that side of things.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, I really think that, the impetus for this conversation and having this sort of presentation really came from one of many of our clients asking these exact questions. And the unique scenario that they had is, they build or create new drugs, right? And they're using external partners in the country, outside of the country, all over the world to run clinical trials, get data back. I mean, it's interesting to look at these things and understand, like, when you're collaborating with people that are outside the country, not to name any other names, but it gets a little uncomfortable, right? It's like, well, we're giving them access to our information. We're asking for certain pieces of information to give us that information. We need them, but we also only need them to have access to these things specifically. And how do you control the permissions, the groups, the structure, the content, and audit all of that? And how do you have all these things? How do you have control? We're talking about, HIPAA, personally identifiable information. I had another client just ask for that same thing last week. I mean, this is a big, big deal for them because a lot of these, joint ventures are happening, or these partnerships are happening where they're doing pretty sensitive work, and it's really, really challenging how they do that, manage it correctly, appropriately, all those things. So challenges in healthcare, in particular healthcare, but mostly on our side, experience like pharma, life sciences, biomedical devices, things like that, where they're developing new things. But you could apply this probably same kind of thing to anywhere that you got like some really sensitive IP, right? You need external partners to build that IP. And how do you do that securely? That's kind of what we're thinking here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's kind of a good lead in into the sort of the second half of the talk, which is the structured sharing. I mean, we've already shown a bit of it in the demo with how you and I have worked together in Clarinet and Extranet User Manager. But as we get into this idea of structured sharing with Microsoft 365, I mean, you wouldn't buy our product because you want to share with 3 people, or even if you have a board of directors of 12 people you want to share with. Out of the box, unstructured works well for that. But as you get into hundreds of thousands of external users, that scale just doesn't work out of the box, and you need to put some structure around that. And you need to understand, what do those groups of external users represent? Are they customers or partners or vendors? Is there committees or projects that you're running? And there could be many different business owners across your organization that could be not only internal to your organization, they could even be external. Think of that pharma example where they're running clinical trials. Maybe you've got one, senior contact at that clinic that's running that trial for you, and you've given them control to manage who from their organization is going to participate in the data sharing on that trial side. It depends on your scenario whether that's appropriate or not, but that's something that we support in that structured sharing scenario. And obviously, as you think about that structured sharing, you can totally roll your own. I mean, you could, crack open code and build a portal and use Microsoft Graph, which is the API that lets you control all this sharing and such. I mean, that's basically how we built our product. But I mean, we've got years of IP and development and learning behind that. Kudos to you if you knock that one out of your park. It's going to be a lot of work, and honestly, we're not that expensive. We'll share the pricing links at the end. It doesn't cover a lot of development to do that. You can actually do it with Azure AD as well. We'll talk about, the different Premium 1 and Premium 2 levels. As you get into those premium products in Azure AD, you can actually set up self-registration and workflows, and you can do some branding and customization around that. I would argue it's not easy, and it's often not still simple from that external user's point of view. You have to put a lot of work into that to make it nice and clean and simple. Whereas, that's been our approach from the beginning. User experience, branding. Go ahead, Daniel.
One point I got to jump in there. You said it, and this is exact. You have to hear this. It is not easy for external people, right? We get a lot of that with our clients that are trying to do this in Azure AD or trying to do the unstructured sharing even, and it's like, but they have to register. They're confused or this, that, whatever. It's like this. It's even if you do this well in Azure AD, it's still got hiccups. Just saying. Still.
Yeah, if you've got 10,000 external users, you don't want 1% of them to have problems signing in, because that's 100 people that you got to deal with or 1,000. I don't know my math. 100, yes, you got to deal with from a support ticket point of view. So yeah, it's got to be simple. Otherwise, they'll just give up and not use your portal from that point of view. So
I'm just going to, sorry, Peter, I'm just going to step in briefly for both of you. We've actually had 2 nice questions come in, one through Q&A, one through chat. Okay. So just so you're aware, I will hold some time for that. But for the participants, please keep the questions coming in. And for Daniel and Peter, I know you can't see the chat right now, but it's what you're saying is resonating because the people are asking some smart questions.
Cool. And if there's an appropriate time to midway answer those, feel free to lob them in there. So,
actually, maybe I will throw it your way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the first question is from somebody who manages a number of retail businesses, each with their own departments in a single tenant who are technically in competition with one another. So they share common services, but they keep the data limited across businesses. They have a new acquisition who has a mature tenant. So this is a question from Ted, and he's curious, how can we best bring this new tenant into the fold?
That M&A scenario is actually a really big scenario for guest tenants. So you think about the integration. You've just gone through a 3-month, 6-month due diligence acquisition. The deal is closed. You got at least a year or two of integration before you even hope to bring those tenants together and have a common platform from that point of view. So yeah, doing the guest sharing between the two tenants absolutely makes sense from that point of view. We actually have a partner company we're going to be doing some sessions with that has a different product that's specific to that, to say, hey, we want to build tight connections between those two tenants, but you could do it with our Extranet User Manager as well, to say, hey, let's invite, pick one tenant as your primary and invite guests in from the other organization and allow them to collaborate from that point of view. And you can have shared teams and shared channels and all of that stuff set up as part of that. So yeah, definitely integrating those through both the shared channels and the guest invitation makes a ton of sense in that scenario.
Perfect. And then the second question's from an anonymous attendee. We use Citrix ShareFile today for external file sharing and exchange. Could the solution you're showing be used as a replacement?
It's funny. I have a pet peeve with one of our clients because they use Citrix Secure Share, and
I promise it wasn't me who asked that question.
That wasn't a leading question. Okay, so picture the scenario. They've got all these millions of documents that contain personal health information in their Microsoft 365, and they're licensed to the Yahoo with E5. They can do sensitivity labels that we're going to talk about in a minute. So they've got lots of security around that. What do they do to share them? They download them to their local PC, upload them into Citrix Secure Share, and share them with an external healthcare provider, who then drops files back, and the process repeats the other way. It's like, this is not a good way of doing it. It's not secure. You've got multiple copies of these floating around. So absolutely, what I'm just going to talk about here with the data rooms is a perfect tie-in to say, hey, let's eliminate Citrix Secure Share and just keep the stuff in one place, which is not only easier, it's way more secure too.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that one too. We've actually shifted clients from ShareFile to Microsoft 365 based external sharing solution, and worked really well for them. I mean, the thing to consider also with ShareFile is the licensing. Honestly, is I don't think I would call it inexpensive. I wouldn't say that. So, yeah.
And we're going to talk about the 365 licensing in that scenario. Okay, so if you use our product, there's a license cost for that. It's not that significant, and there's zero incremental cost on what you're already paying for your Microsoft 365 licenses. So yeah, there's definitely a cost benefit as well.
Yeah, there's some analysis to be done there, depending on how much content you have. So you got to run some numbers and run some ROI. Yeah. So there's not like a simple yes or no. It's a little more data needed for that. But technically speaking, yes,
can all be done. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So data rooms isn't so much a product; it's more a way of how we're configuring our product. And we're starting to build vertical solutions, and this is one of them, to say, hey, if you're in not just those three scenarios that we just covered, but other scenarios where you need to either securely distribute documents or collect documents, data room is a good example for that. And it sits on top of SharePoint, but it provides that simple user interface. And what I showed in the Clarinet partner portal is sort of a small picture of that. We're going to go deeper into that from that point of view. And it's very customizable depending on what your scenario is and what that looks like. So let's actually start in the admin side of our product here. So this is used both by IT when they're setting the environment up, but it's also can be delegated to the business so they can do their own things through there. So let's say I want to start doing data rooms with a number of groups. I need a place to do that. And what we've decided from an architecture point of view is to create a Microsoft team, not for every data room, for each internal business unit that wants to have data rooms. So let's say I'm in the M&A side of our business, and I know that we're doing a bunch of acquisitions. We got multiple due diligence going on at the same time. I need data rooms for each of those. I create one Microsoft team through this process and keep those individual data rooms in there private to each of those conversations that are happening through there. So I would come in here and say, I want to request a data room, and it's going to spin up a Microsoft team. I won't do all that because it takes a while to spin all that infrastructure up. And right now, this is using some open source Teams provisioning that we've developed, that we've integrated in with our product. We're actually building integrations into third-party products like Orchestry. So if you're an Orchestry client, that provisioning of the data room team would happen through your existing Orchestry workspaces templates as part of that. But basically, when I request that, what I end up getting is a team here. This is actually our dev tenant here. So you're going to see a whole bunch of random made up names from testing, but this data room team is the main one that we're working with here. So I need to do that once organizationally for each group that wants to have data rooms. And then if I come into the files tab in Teams here, what happens is I'll request a folder for each data room that I want to share out. And I've actually created one here for Clarinet Webinar to say, hey, let's have a spot to share from a demo point of view. And I can look at this in SharePoint and I'll see a similar kind of structure if I come into my documents view here, because SharePoint is the files underneath Teams from that perspective. So if I drill down into the documents library, I'll see that same general folder. And I can come into that Clarinet webinar. Now I've created this as an empty one. I actually did a few dry runs, but I deleted everything out of there. But one of the scenarios, particularly for the financial institution or the M&A scenario, where you've got a bunch of things that you need from every organization that you work with. You're doing a loan application. Here's our 15 documents that we need. We're running a pharma trial. Here's a dozen things that we need as part of that. So what I would do is I would request a new data room through the site here. It would create the folder and it would set it all up for me as a starting point. And it drops this Excel in for me as the business owner to start with, to say, hey, what are the things that you want coming in here? And Daniel, you gave me this just as a sort of a sample set of things that a clinical trial pharma type of scenario might want to collect from their clinical partner. And I just randomly set some of them as required and some of them as not. You'll see in a minute how that presents itself. And it's basically giving some instructions to the person you're asking files from, which may not be one person. It could be a lot of people in that clinical setting that need to drop different documents in there as part of that. But it's private and secure to that one group that you've set up. And you can even put some instructions in here. This one is important, and flesh that out as part of that. And this is all just standard Excel online. This is not anything fancy from that point of view. I can close that down, and I can now come over to the actual data room page. This is the portal page that you see from the outside. And right now you're seeing the out-of-the-box extranet portal branding as part of that. But actually, I had one of our developers last minute this morning. I pinged her at 10 p.m. and said, can you build me branding for the Clarinet webinar in 2 hours? And she's like, yeah, sure, let's do that. So she pulled some links together here. Oh, I'm not logged in, so it's going to cause me to log in. But you can always already see the Clarinet branding coming in from there. Now, all we did was change the color scheme and put a logo in there, change the title. But you can do a lot from that brand point of view and make it a very bespoke experience through there. And there we go. We're back to our branding page. We've even got other vendors and partners in there that we can brand to. But if I come back to this page here and just do a refresh on it, it'll now load up in the Clarinet branding. It's the same portal. It's got all the same content in it. It's just got a different look and feel to it. And this is a big ugly URL because this is our development integration location. You can have your own friendly URL with your own domain in there. You've got complete control over all of that. And you can see here is the list of requested documents. So let's say, for example, Daniel, you would set this data room folder up for me, and I'm part of that external clinical facility that's running this trial. And you've given me instructions of what documents you want from me, which are required, and some instructions like that piece that I just typed in through there. Okay, so now I need to upload documents into here. Yes, you could have given me the link to this folder in SharePoint, but again, overwhelming, too many things. You only want me to do one thing, which is upload some documents into there. So I can come down here to the uploader and say, hey, there's nothing here yet, because it hides those Excel files that we don't want the owner or the person being requested to see, and we just give them a couple of links. In fact, these ones here for editing the Excel and seeing the SharePoint, I normally wouldn't even see, because I'm currently signed in as the person that owns it. I see those. I would only see these 3 links here. So let's start with the upload. So I'll grab a couple of documents here. They're just random sample lorem ipsum documents, but I've dragged 3 documents from my Windows Explorer into the browser, and boom, the dialog is there, and those are the 3 documents that we're asking for. And let's say, Daniel, it was really important for you to get not just the documents, but to give some categorization of what the types of those documents were. So if I go ahead and say, hey, I want to upload, it says, hang on, you've got to fill this one in. I need a choice from you. I mean, even if it's, just randomly picking a few things here, including I don't know, and I'm going to put other in there, as long as I've made a decision and put something in here, and I can even provide some comments back about those documents that I've uploaded through here. And I hit that upload button. I won't show you those steps, but if I want to do that in SharePoint, yes, I could drag and drop the files in, but then I need to select them one at a time, bring up the panel on the right, pick the right metadata, put my comments in. Nobody's ever going to do that. It's too complicated and it's too much work, but we've made it a seamless flow through here. So all through our product, we've spent a lot of time on user experience and said, how do we minimize the number of steps and make it very easy to follow that pattern? So 2 things happen there. One is, I now see those documents that I loaded up through here. If I click on that first one, I can see my comments on that one. Everything's there. It's all simple. But also this list of requested documents got shorter because I provided a couple of the required documents. They're no longer in the list of requested. So it kind of gives you a progress bar of, hey, where am I on this? Which becomes even more valuable macro above this. So Daniel, imagine you're that administrator of this trial, and you've got 7 clinical agencies around the world that are running these trials on this one drug for you. You'd have 7 data rooms for that. We can even roll this up in Power BI and give you a dashboard and say, hey, which of those 7 are completed, partway through, haven't even started, so you can kind of see at a high level what's happening with that. We actually deployed a version of this, an earlier version, to a publicly traded client of ours, and they have 50 odd operating companies underneath the parent company that are all completely independent, incorporated companies. They have their own CFOs, their own financial, and they use this to do financial reporting and collection, to say, hey, every month there's a bunch of stuff we need from each of those subs, and there's a hard deadline. There's SEC filings as a publicly traded company. They got to report their earnings, so we need all these things on this schedule, and they can see that at a high level through there. And then if I need to, I say, hey, maybe that wasn't an agenda, I need to change what that is. Again, very simple. Come in here, just change that, go ahead and update, and it's updating that one document. And if I actually go back to SharePoint, I didn't even need to refresh my page. I've got live updates happening in SharePoint. In fact, if I go to my Teams tab and I go into the Clarinet webinar there, I see them all there. There's only one copy of them. They're living in Microsoft 365. We're just providing a much friendlier skin that scales in this structured model to much broader from them. If I need to add new people in here, I can click the edit group membership, come over into the admin console and just start, adding people through here. I could make, somebody a membership manager to say, hey, you now have the ability to do this. Who can come in here through here? So that delegation model of making it easy for the business to manage this. If I've got net new people that I want to add in through here, I can bang in their details. I can say, hey, I want to put them in the Clarinet. I just start typing that, and it already finds that data room group for me. And when I invite that person, they're already in the group, and they can start sharing from there. So just attacking it from all those angles and making it super simple to do that from that point of view. So Daniel, you actually didn't get a chance to see a lot of this. I mean, we talked conceptually, but we literally pulled this together in the last day or so. And
yeah, not the final, right? Not with the everything else, but yeah, it's. I mean, the thing that I want to go back to that you said just 2 seconds ago, basically, is we've made it easy. Like, look at adding a user here. It's so easy, man. Like, it's so much better. It's so much better than trying to figure it all out yourself. So, I know we have a few more slides and we're kind of running up against time, but we also have some questions and I want to make sure we get to those as well. Julian, you want to field some of those for us?
For sure, because it's very relevant to what you guys are just talking about. So one question, Peter, is on permissions. So can we have these data rooms set up to allow the internal team, the acquiring entity, e.g., see all the data, and the shared team, in brackets, the business being acquired, can see limited folders and documents?
Yeah, so that's what I meant. It often gets customized, and we've delivered a portal like this for a manufacturer who wants to share engineering drawings for approval and collect drawings back, but they want to keep them separate and say the client can't touch what we've created, but they can do their own thing. So yeah, there's lots of nuances that we can build from a permissions point of view, because at the end of the day, we're not actually implementing those rules. They're actually down in SharePoint itself. So you want to create a subfolder and say, hey, they can only upload into that subfolder and set up the permissions appropriately in SharePoint. We'll surface that in an easy way in the portal, and people will only be able to do what they're supposed to do in the right spots from there. So we're not building a whole new, security mechanism. We're basically layering on top of what Microsoft already has and just making it simple.
Perfect. And that actually, another question from another attendee had asked, do you still recommend / use custom document libraries and SharePoint groups when dealing with departments that need unique permissions based on function or role?
Yeah, I mean, that gets into a broader information architecture planning. I find more and more as Teams has just overtaken the focus of how most organizations work today, that drives a lot of that information architecture. And often we end up with folders underneath the channels from the team rather than separate libraries. But that's a decision. I mean, you can create a separate library. You can still, put a tab into your team to point to that library so it still feels the same when you're in Teams. All those options are still there. So there's no clear answer one way or the other. It's definitely not a bad idea. It's appropriate to the appropriate scenario.
Perfect. And I'll just mention, just so the attendees are aware, that we're asking or monitoring the questions, but I know this one's coming up, Peter, is one of the questions is how is the product licensed? But I think you're going to be speaking to that.
Yeah, we don't actually have it in as a slide, but we were going to include a link to the website. And we're very, oops, I need to type that properly. We're very public and transparent from that point of view. I like full transparency in all things business. So if you come to the pricing page here, these are the annual costs, and it's not per user. The initial purchase is for 1,000 external users. For the 13,380, you can work the math to figure out what the user cost is on that. But we didn't want to get to the point that every time you invited somebody, you were paying $1 or more for the license. And as you bump over and say, hey, we need another 1,000 users, it's not like it's double that. It's another $1,800 on top of that. So it's much smaller for the increments from there. There's also a lesser version, the user manager, that just lets you do the user management point of view. It wouldn't give you the data rooms piece. The data room is part of the suite product through there. And then there's some one-time costs to basically get that installed and branded and set up in your tenant. The other important thing is while we host the product itself, so you don't have to pay for the Azure hosting for that, it's connected to your Microsoft 365 tenant. So none of your data is living in our tenant. It all stays in your tenant. We run data centers in Azure currently in US, Canada, Western Europe. We're talking about adding some more regions as customers pop up, like Australia and New Zealand. But yeah, your data is your data, and you own that through your relationship with Microsoft 365. We're not getting any access to it as part of that. I think we're probably going to run out of time here. I mean, we had a few more slides. They will be available in the deck. Things around the sensitivity labeling. We touched on things like personal health information. You can apply labels to that content, and then things like multi-factor authentication, encryption can be done on that. And again, that's all out of the box Microsoft. And that can be streamlined so it's super simple. And some of these things need premium Azure AD licensing. But the nice thing is that if you license your staff for Azure AD Premium, as long as you've got less than 50,000 monthly active users externally, there's zero cost for those premium features for your external users. And even if you get beyond 50,000, it's a tiny, like 0.4 of a cent per user beyond that. So it's not a significant cost from there. We've got some links to explore some more from that point of view. We've got our test ride. Encourage you to check that out. We've got a link in there to the pricing, as well as to the ability to say, hey, I'd love a session one-on-one that we can drill through this. And we have a whole demo portal that we can take you through and then give you the keys so you can play with it yourself following that. Daniel, I do want to give you a minute because we've only got 2 left here. Any wrap-up points on your side?
We have another question here, but I'll wrap up points. I mean, in reality, like what we wanted to show here as a team. By the way, I want to say thanks to Peter, Julian, Irina, the whole EUM team. It was fun, right? Like, thanks for letting us have fun, create this. And I'll tell you something. What we wanted to show was unstructured, structured, EUM, and like you don't need any one of them necessarily. You might need one for a certain scenario or another for another scenario. And we kind of wanted to present that to you and say, here's what you could do. And
Different
for
options.
example, like what we did, we created this PowerPoint presentation. We did it through the shared channel in Teams. Our conversation was there. Our files were there. It was seamless collaboration, communication amongst the team. It was like we're all the same team. I mean, isn't that how it's supposed to be? So we didn't use Extranet User Manager for that. We didn't use unstructured sharing for that because I can't imagine doing unstructured sharing. It would have been horrible, right? It would have worked, but it would have been not as seamless. And this team was so awesome to work with. So this is what we wanted to give you guys and show you guys and kind of give it and present it to you. So I'm glad we were able to do it. If you want any information, please check out these LinkedIns or any of the slide deck. We have contact information throughout. Real quick, actually, we're at time. So
yeah,
I'll respect
so
Peter and
one
Julian.
last thing.
Yeah.
We probably didn't have a chance to answer all the questions. We will follow up back with people. Even now, if you've got one and thinking, hey, I can't ask it now, go ahead. We'll follow up afterwards. And awesome afternoon, morning, depending on your time zone. Glad everybody could join us. And Daniel, thanks so much for having us. It was great.
Thank you guys. It was awesome. Thanks everybody for joining.
Bye now.